Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Sunday, January the 12th. And tonight we're going to be chatting with our good friend, Allan Wall. Allan, of course, a contributor to his own blog, as well as a person who's written a lot of opinions about Mexico and our own border situation here in the United States. So, Allan, welcome. Happy New Year. Great to see you again.
Yes, I believe it's the first time I'm on your show in 2025.
The first
Amazing.
time we're off and running, and I'm sure
Right.
hopefully we'll have a few more of these get-togethers. But Allan, I wanted to begin. It's not about Mexico, but it is the number one topic in the country and maybe even around the world. And that is what is happening in LA, your reaction to it. My reaction, I know it's easy to get political and partisan about these things. Obviously, I wouldn't vote for Governor Newsom, and I don't live in California, so I wouldn't vote for the mayor that they have. So, that is a given, I think. But it seems to me that beyond politics, that in a civilized country, you have to expect that the fire hydrants are going to work. I mean, that's about as basic as it gets.
Yeah.
And when fire hydrants don't work, and that pretty much makes the firefighters useless if they can't get water. I mean, I think that contributed to a lot of the damage, Allan.
Right. And the reservoirs should all be, have the water. If you have a reservoir and there's no water in it, what use is it?
Right. So it just seems to me that what we're seeing in LA, the same thing we're seeing in San Francisco, Chicago, Milwaukee, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. is a disgrace, the nation's capital. And you can't even go there at nights with your car because you're not coming out with your car. It's absolutely horrible. New York City, we have all these crime problems in the subway. I mean, it just seems like the conversation we have to have is about the failure of the Democrat model, the blue model, whatever you want to call it, because it is really not working. I mean, the truth is that these cities are not doing what they're supposed to do to take care of their citizens. Again, I go back to the fire hydrants, Allan.
Right, exactly. And a lot of the people in LA are complaining, including, liberal people.
Yeah.
Of course, they lost their homes, but it seems to me a lot of our big cities just have leaders that just don't exude a lot of confidence.
No.
You listen to their excuses and you think, wow, is this the best that they can do in these cities?
Yeah. Well, it all goes back to the voters, of course. They didn't get there by mistake. Right. They got there because they were voted. I don't know in some of these cities how much of a choice these citizens have. Because I think it could be the lack of a viable Republican Party. I mean, that's clearly the case in New York, where if you have a good Republican candidate, he can win, like Giuliani.
Yeah.
But so I mean, again, it's easy to blame. I just look at the fact that a civilized country, a first world country, the fire hydrants have to work. And like you say, if you have a reservoir for water and it's empty, what are these people doing? What is the function? I mean, what are these people doing? They work for a city, they make a good salary, and look at the schools in Chicago. That's another example of the failure. I mean, the public school systems in Chicago are graduating kids who can't even read and write at their own level. I mean,
right.
How are we helping kids by doing stuff like that, Al?
Right. Yeah, it was a crisis in leadership in many, many big cities.
Yeah, I agree. And I just saw before we started, I saw that the death total is up to 22 in LA. Man. And I'm sure, sadly, it may go up further.
Probably will.
Because they just can't seem to control the fires. It's kind of hard to control fires when you don't have running water.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the reason you got all these fire hydrants around town for these situations. So, we wish the best to everybody out there. I mean, it's not a time to politicize things, but at the same time, there has to be a frank discussion.
It's kind of impossible not to, though, to politicize these things.
Well, yeah, I mean, no, I agree. I mean, look, it goes the other way too. I remember when this incident in Uvalde, Texas happened,
Oh,
the shooting
yes.
at the
Right.
school. I mean, the ambulance had not arrived at the schools to pick up the kids who had been shot, and the Democrats were already on television blaming it on Governor Abbott.
Yeah. Right.
So, they're pretty good at it too. They can play the
Oh,
game
yeah. Oh, yeah.
too. Anyway, well, I just hope it all works out, but I just fear that it's going to get worse before it gets any better out there in
Yeah.
LA.
And look at all
Let's
the
talk.
houses and just people who lost their homes and all the houses. I mean, that's going to be very expensive to rebuild.
Well, and I wrote a post at American Thinker today where I talked about that, where I feel that many people are just going to pack up and leave.
Oh, yes.
Because I mean, let's say you lose your house,
right.
You don't have any insurance, so it's lost. You've lost everything. The bank has lost because they were financing you. Where's this money going to come from to rebuild your house without insurance? The banks are going to take heavy losses. The insurance companies are going to take heavy losses. The state of California is not going to have any money. They're going to try to go to the federal government, but hopefully the federal government puts a few strings on the money coming. Hopefully that'll happen.
Maybe they'll all just go to Dallas. They'll relocate to Dallas.
Well, I hope not, because they tend to, many of them keep voting the same way. I mean, there's a big sign somewhere in one of the highways coming into Texas. There's a big sign, and I'm paraphrasing it, but it basically says, "Don't forget why you left California." Something like, it's something like that. I'm paraphrasing it, but it's like, don't forget why you left California, and that's what we hope, that when they get over here, they understand, why they came. And they're not just coming to Texas. I mean, a lot of them are going to go to Oklahoma, to the Carolinas. South Carolina is booming, from what I understand. So, I mean, they'll go a lot of places. But if I was out there and, I had just lost my house and the economy, who knows how quickly I'm probably not going to get my house back. So why not just back up and start again somewhere else? I mean, I'd be tempted to just say, hey, I'm done. I'm going to go somewhere else and start again. That's probably what I would do. And just take my family and let's say, well, let's go somewhere else and we'll start again. I don't think you'll have trouble finding work. Many of these people are very talented people. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Well, let's talk a little bit about Mexico, because President Trump will be president in 10 days or whatever, 9 days.
Yeah.
And I've been following a lot of Mexican podcasts and just trying to catch up with what's going on down there. And it seems to me that that Trump is really shaking up Mexico. The reaction of people goes anywhere from he's going to invade Mexico, so he's going to make our life very difficult. There are some people who actually say, it'd be good if he takes out the cartels. That might help us. But the majority of people seem very scared by what Trump is talking about or might do. What's your reaction to what's going on down there, Allan?
Well, just one general statement. What's amazing is he's not even the president yet, and yet he's been driving the agenda, not just with Mexico, but with countries all over the world. They're already treating him as if he were the president. And in Mexico, it's just amazing, all the stuff that they're talking about, the deportations. Who are they going to accept? What about the people who aren't Mexicans who get deported to Mexico? And, of course, renaming the Gulf of Mexico. It's just amazing. It just goes on and on. It's a big deal, right?
It is, and renaming the Gulf of Mexico, I that's just typical Trump.
Right.
I mean, he's not going to do that. Obviously, I don't even know how you name these bodies of water.
Plus, they've got their own. Yeah, I mean, they have their own language anyway. You don't have to have the same name of something in every language. He's not going to force them to call it something else.
But I don't even know. I mean, these international body of water. I mean, like a Gulf or an ocean. Who did? I mean, I know like they get their name But is there anything that says you cannot change their name? I've been trying to figure. I don't think there is anything that says that it has to be the Gulf of Mexico. I could call it the Gulf of Texas and put
Right.
it on a map, and nobody can sue me for it. I mean, it's not like a copyright type thing. It's just I can call it whatever I want to call it.
Well, a big example is what the body of water we call the Persian Gulf. The Arab countries call it the Arabian Gulf.
Okay.
And well, I mean, what can you do? They just, but we call it the Persian Gulf, but they call it the Arabian Gulf. Same Gulf, you just have to, realize you're talking about the same body of water.
But I think, it's just like turning Canada into the 51st state.
Right.
That's just Trump needling people. He's just like, he's just getting, he just wants to bother them a little bit. So he tells them, he's angry at Trudeau because Trudeau said some things about him during the campaign. So he's going to get back at him with this kind of stuff. He is right about the fact that Canada doesn't pay their NATO shares. That is right. There's nothing wrong about that. But I just think that's Trump being Trump. But one thing I've noticed, Alan, whether he's talking about Mexico or whether he's talking about Panama or whether he's talking about Greenland, what's the common denominator of those three? China.
Yeah, yes.
If you really step back for a second and just, get over all of the Trumpisms, if I could put it that way, all the stuff he says, what he's really talking about is China in the Panama Canal, China in Greenland. So, it seems to me that that's really what he's talking about. Everybody gets all hung up about everything else, but to me, that's what he's talking about. So when he talks about tariffs with Mexico, he doesn't want Mexico to build Chinese electric cars.
Right. Yeah, there's a method to his madness.
I think so. And he drops these bombs and everybody gets all shaken up. But, I think people need to back up for a second and count to 10. As I was telling a Mexican friend the other day, Trump is not going to invade Mexico. Trump, honestly, the only thing Trump cares about is the free trade agreement and the border. Everything else he could care less about. He could care less about whether the train Maya runs on time,
right,
or whether the airport is running on time, or whether the refineries are working. He could care less about that. It's just the free trade agreement and the Chinese involvement,
right,
and of course the border. He's very concerned about it. He should be concerned about it. It's a very serious problem.
And he is not inclined to meddle in Mexican politics. Probably less inclined than the Democrats were, because they will often say, we need to improve human rights in Mexico, et cetera, et cetera. Trump is not interested in that. No. He's just looking at the bilateral issues.
Right. And by the way, speaking of getting involved in your neighbor's politics, I can recall, who was it, López Obrador or Vicente Fox? Literally, coming here and getting involved. So
yes, several Mexican presidents have done that.
Yeah,
that's very common. Yes,
the Mexican consulates became almost like a unofficial headquarters of the Democrats. They were basically telling people how to vote.
It's the biggest, it's the biggest consular network in the world.
Is that right?
Over 50 consuls. It is a huge network, and they do a lot of things, meddling all the time, and so they don't have any room to talk.
On that, that's like the guy who lives in a glass house. They cannot throw stones. Am I using the right analogy about the glass house? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
People who live in glass houses.
Yeah, that's right. That's the one issue they shouldn't complain about. But one of the topics that has gotten a lot of conversation down there, of course, is the cartels, and the idea that Mexico would declare them, or not Mexico, but Trump would declare them a terrorist organization.
Right.
What's your feeling on that? Is that good or bad? How do you feel about that?
I don't know, because it depends on what is the advantage to calling them terrorist organizations. Maybe there's certain legal things that they can do. which they ought to be trying to fight the cartels in finances anyway, but I don't know. People have talked about that for years. I've heard that discussed before, but nobody ever actually does it. Maybe it's not as effective as some people say it is.
Well, the one thing I've heard, and I have mixed feelings about it too, just like you do, because it may raise the expectations of what we can do.
Yes.
In the sense that people think now we're going to do away with the cartels, and the idea is, I guess, that if you name them a terrorist organization, you can treat them the same way we go after Al Qaeda or whatever, where you go after the leaders. But that, I think, also raises the possibility that we could be killing civilians if you go after these people. I mean, they're not going to be hiding I mean, they'll have their mansions and all of that. But I think the idea that we're going to introduce special forces in Mexico to go after these people, there may be a better way to do it by simply closing the border.
Yes.
And making it more difficult for them to come. So I have mixed feelings about it. I understand the political value of it, to name them terrorists, because you can say, well, Americans have been killed by fentanyl. So in that sense, I can see that. But there may be more effective ways of doing the same thing, Alan.
I think so. I'm very skeptical of these people that say, oh yeah, we could just bomb the cartels and end it. No, I don't think so. As we've seen from the history of the cartels, if you take out their leaders, you don't eliminate the cartels, and you actually can, bring forth more violence. But look what's happening in Sinaloa.
Right.
When they arrested those leaders, and that, unchained all this violence within the cartel. Plus, there's like 150 cartels. Many of them are very small, but there's just a lot of violence going on.
Yeah, my sense is that it sounds real good to talk about naming them as terrorist organizations. There is a PR or political value to it, because
Yes.
It sounds like you're doing something. But my sense is that what we have to do is say we're going to close the border and nothing's coming in. And we're going to make sure that nothing comes in. Or as much as you can. You can never close it 100%.
Of course, yes.
But you can certainly close it. And Texas is a good example of that, Alan. I mean, Texas, one of the things that Governor Abbott has done here is that he has pretty much made it difficult to come into Texas, unless you're coming in through one of the channels, one of the legal channels. It's really tough to walk in like they used to before, because you're going to be arrested and turned over to ICE.
Oh, Abbott's he's done more than any other border governor, much more.
I agree. And the results are there. That we have a much more border under control than Arizona or certainly California. Now we have the longest border. That obviously may be the reason. But yeah, I have mixed feelings about naming them terrorist organizations. I'm not sure. And also, what happens if let's say you take out a plant in a rural area, or even in a residential area, like we saw here recently in Culiacan, where there was a plant actually operating in a residential neighborhood. The New York Times got into trouble because they wrote that article. But I mean, what are you going to do? You bomb it? You're going to kill a bunch of civilians working there? That, I think, could be counterproductive.
Oh, definitely.
It could actually turn some Mexicans against the idea.
Right.
I think Mexicans probably want to see us do more, but I don't think they want to see drones taking out. I don't know. I mean, I have to wait and see the plan, but I think there are probably other things that we can do. Now, I know that you write, and forgive me for not saying that when we started, you write a post, the Mexico News Report, that you publish quite a bit. Are you getting any information in your blog or from your sources about the Mexican economy? Are you hearing anything about it?
I haven't seen any recent stats on that. I've been looking at other things, but that would be a good topic to look into. You know, what's the actual direction right now of the economy? But
Because
I haven't checked that lately.
yeah, it's hard to get information, but some of these podcasts that I've listened to, they talk a great deal about the debt level being
Oh
pretty
yes,
high,
yes.
and especially Pemex. And now
Oh
I
yeah,
understand that
yeah.
Mexicana Airlines is like, flying empty most of the time. That the government tried to save Mexicana Airlines and it didn't really do anything. So there are some concerns in that area, but it's hard to pin. It's hard to pin it down. Now, what are you hearing about deportations here and down there? I mean, like, what do you think the deportation plan is going to be, Alan? I mean, the Trump deportation plan is going to be.
Well, you know, Thomas Homan has been talking a lot about it, and I've actually heard that you know, well, we won't know till it actually happens, but I've actually heard that they're planning some big raid right after Trump becomes president near Washington, D.C. It's like a way to signal to everybody, yes, we're serious about this. And I think if you want to have an effective deportation policy, you have to, you know, hit the ground running, and you have to be very consistent, because we know that the media is going to go full court press about how, you know, inhumane this is and all the people that are suffering and on and on and on. So you have to get right on it, you know, and don't apologize for it.
Right. Well, the other part of the deportation, I mean, I agree with you with the criminals and those criminal elements in the country. I'm also very concerned about terrorists in the country, to be honest with you. Because when you open the border the way we have and you're letting people in as easily as we have, I'm very concerned about terrorists who may be in the country. I mean, I think it was the director of the FBI who recently said, I saw a quote that he feared that there might be, groups in the country who could potentially act. We saw what happened in New Orleans. That was one person,
Oh,
but I'm sure
yes.
there may be others. You know, I forgot the name. There's a name that they use for these groups, but I'm concerned about terrorists. I really am, as well as I am criminals. But one area that I hope that they do implement and exercise is the people who have gone through the process, don't qualify, get a letter from the court saying you don't qualify, therefore you have to leave the country, and then they don't pay attention to the
Oh,
letter.
yeah.
I
Right.
mean, I heard that there's 1.4 million people in that situation.
And
1.4 million people who are in your face, just violating the rule of the court. I mean, that's
exactly.
crazy. That is
Right.
just crazy.
Yep. They need to get them out. Otherwise, no one will take it seriously.
Well, that's right. So I think if you did that, then all of a sudden you get that letter, you're leaving because you know they're going to come after you. Now, what about the argument? And you hear this all the time that you're going to separate families, or some of these people have children who were born here. How do you react to that?
Well, if they're minors, they need to go with their parents, regardless of their citizenship. So really, they should just it's like Homan said, deport the family together. Then they can sort it out later. But if they're minors, they need to go with their parents. It's just ridiculous to leave minors here and deport their parents.
Right. No, that's exactly right. Now, the other thing too is that, and maybe you've heard this as well, that there's like, I don't know how many thousands of kids that they cannot find.
Oh yeah, yeah, they're unaccounted for. That's
Yeah,
wow, that's very frightening.
that is. I mean, what are these kids doing? Where are they? I mean, I guess if I had to guess, they're in the United States somehow. They're
Right.
living with somebody. And who that somebody is, I don't know. I fear, in particular, for the young women,
Oh
teenage
yes.
girls or whatever, who probably could be pushed into some kind of prostitution or
Right.
whatever. So I fear that. I fear
Yes.
that as well. But I mean, how is it humanitarian? This is the argument that I always have with people how is it humanitarian to allow this kind of human trafficking? How is that humanitarian? I
Oh,
don't think it is at all.
it's not. It's not at all. Yeah, it's a lot of the things that go along with an open border are not humanitarian at all, and there's a lot of people that suffer as a result of these policies.
That's right, and that's right, and I think the other thing too that we need to do, and I speak here as someone who came to the United States legally, so
Right, right.
I'm speaking from that perspective. I came here. I was 12 when I came here with my parents, but we came here legally, and I think the message has to go out that hey, we love immigration. We love what immigrants contribute to the country. I mean, I'm part of the Cuban immigration. Look how much we've done. I mean, there's almost 2 million Cubans now in the United States, not just my generation, but the ones who were born here, actually. And they've contributed tremendously to the United States in economics and everything else. I see you got a visitor there at home who wants to get on the air. Okay, well, you got on the air, right? But
Right,
so,
right.
I mean, I'm all for legal immigration. I'm all for saying, hey, let's have more legal immigration, people who have certain skills that we don't have. I'm all for that. But it has to be done legally and orderly. I think that's the biggest disappointment that I have, how chaotic and disorderly this whole thing has been, Alan.
Well, it is, and it's by design. I think under the Biden administration, it has been.
Yeah. Well, they were trying to, I guess, impact the census, right? How many people were counted or whatever.
Right.
But I just to me it's just idiotic for a country to do something like that. As I say, I speak as a legal immigrant. I speak as someone
Right. Yes.
who came here legally, but our family had to follow a process
Right.
to come to the United States. Now, I know what people always say, well, the Cubans had special treatment. Okay, we did to some extent because it was in the middle of the Cold War and the United States had recognized Cuba as a communist country and they were trying to help us refugees. Yes, we did have that advantage, but it was everything that applied to the Cubans was passed by the Congress and signed by the president. So it wasn't like, we were just coming here and showing up. Now, some people did. Some people did, like Mariel. Remember that, Mariel?
Oh, yeah. Right.
We had like 100,000 people that just showed up.
Yeah.
So that there was a little bit of that. But that was still, 10%, maybe less than the entire Cuban refugee or the entire Cuban population that came here. But I just feel very strongly that there has to be order. I mean, I have a friend from Colombia who every time this subject comes up, he gets very angry because his sister is waiting to come in legally.
Oh,
And
yeah.
she's been waiting, it's a long process and it's also costly. You got to hire lawyers and all of that. So, those are the people that I'm worried about, the ones who respect the law, and they're sitting over here watching everybody else come in, Alan.
Right. And they've got to ask themselves, wow, maybe I should just, jump the border. Maybe that would be better.
Well, they would get up here faster. That's for sure. But it just, that's the part that bothers me. There's simply, you have to have immigration laws and they have to be respected.
Yeah, of
And
course.
if you do that, then yes, come in. We love to have you. I mean, this country was extremely generous to me and to my family when they let us in. I had a chance to grow up in a free country because we came here. So yes, I love the United States, and I've always felt that the United States is a generous country when it comes to immigration. We're not an anti-immigrant country by no means.
And it's great, but it's great that you're saying that because you appreciate all this. Unfortunately, some of these people now, they arrive complaining, and that's, we don't want that either.
Well, as my late mother used to say, whenever any Cuban would complain about the United States, saying, well, about this or that, my mother would say, in Spanish, in her old Cuban Spanish, good Cuban Spanish, basically something along the lines of "Get the F back to Cuba." So she was very, very blunt in how she said it, but I think she made the point. I mean, we had family members who were in political prison, so we know
Oh,
the
wow.
story pretty well.
Yeah.
My dad's cousin was in political prison for 14 years without a trial.
Oh, man.
So
Wow.
we know the story. We know the story
Yeah.
quite well. But anyway, we love the United States, but we love the fact that it's a country of laws, and that's what it's all
Right.
about.
We don't want to give that up. Yes.
No, by all means, by all means. There's also something too. I mean, when you have legal immigration and orderly immigration, things just get done better.
Yes.
The country, I think, is better off that way. Well, we're just about out of time. Anything that we missed? Anything that we didn't cover? I know we went through quite a bit.
Well, it's just a week from tomorrow is Trump's inauguration, so he'll really be the president. I'm just very interested to see what happens.
That's right, but they're, like you said, they're already treating him like the president. Everybody seems to be. I wonder who from Mexico is coming to the inauguration. Have you heard anything?
I don't know. I haven't heard. I don't know.
Because I know that
she ought to come. She ought to come.
She should come. She should come. I mean, she actually, and I keep saying, I keep thinking about this. Trump could actually be her strongest ally.
That's
because
true.
I don't think these cartels are helping Mexico one bit.
No.
And the violence and everything else. I mean, so you would think that, although I don't know if you heard this, or maybe you can confirm it, they have stopped a few caravans, haven't they?
Yes, they have. Right. And they seem to have cracked down more in Biden's last year because they were working together with Biden, because Biden finally decided, well, this is not looking good.
Right.
So actually, they have lowered the amount of people passing through the country. They just need to keep that up.
Yeah, and I'm sure that at some point it became a burden for them too.
That's true. Also,
I mean, you just cannot have all these people in your country that you don't know anything about.
Right.
I mean, that could become a risk for you as well. Where Allan, we got 25 off the ground, and I think a good way. I hope that we do it again soon. And as always, thank you so much for your time, and my best to you and your family. And keep doing those good reports that you do on your blog. It's Mexico News Report, right?
Yes, MexicoNewsReport.com.
Right. All right. And I have a link to it on the show information. But thank you for all you do. And thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. Have a good, we'll have a good 2025, I hope.
All right. I guess the next time I talk to you, we'll have a new president.
You're right.
I think so. All right, Allan. Thank you very much and good night.
Thank you.
All right. Our good friend, Allan Wall, editor of the MexicoNewsReport.com. Very good source of information. Good place to go get information about Mexico. And Allan also writes about the border issues and stuff like that as well. And you can find that at allanwall.info, which is his website of other issues that are not specifically about Mexico. Allan lived in Mexico and knows the country quite well. Well, thank you for listening. Thank you for enjoying the night with us. Not a lot of Cowboy news these days. We still don't know if we're going to have a coach or if McCarthy's coming back. We don't know anything about that, but there was a pretty good game this afternoon between the Packers and the Eagles, and that I think the Eagles won. But that was the only really good game. Every other game has been kind of a blowout. But we do congratulate Ohio State. They beat Texas. Now, that's bad news, but it was a great game. That I always like to watch a good game. And that Ohio State-Texas game was really a good game to watch. Thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later.